In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. I am really excited to speak with today's guest. He's been a CEO and technology executive for over 30 years, including 26 years leading his current company, where he's been revolutionizing the AV industry. That's been a passion of his since his teenage years. He's also driven numerous innovations in the AV world that I'm looking forward to dive into today. His company is known in the industry for creating cutting-edge products, and their latest product recently won a prestigious award for 2024 Most Innovative Product in Sound and Audio. He is the CEO and founder of Aurora Multimedia. Please welcome Paul Harris to the show.
Hi, and thank you for having me.
Great to have you, Paul. And I know there's a lot that I want to get into with you today. So I wanted to ask if you can start by telling me, what do you think is the biggest misconception out there about driving major change or innovation in an organization?
Well, the biggest misconception that I see when companies have to drive an innovation or changes, they try to follow sometimes too much of what everyone else is doing. And while it's important to look at what your competitors are doing, because you obviously have to stay competitive, you have to also be innovative. You have to think out of the box, because that's going to set the goals of what your company is going to do when it introduces the product. Are you going to be in a price competition, or are you going to be more in a value type of competition where we can do this and that values the product at a different level, be it higher or lower accordingly. So one of the things that I try to tell people out there is when you're doing these things, for our company, we do everything based on innovation. That's where we go, is we purposely try to develop technologies that are unique and different, but still hit that mainstream element. Because if you go off the mainstream, you become a niche, lower sales, but justifies a little bit of a higher margin and a higher price point because it's a niche. But if you're going to hit the mainstream of sales with a little bit of that niche mixed in to get that higher level, we like the innovation part of it. So we go for a combination of both in that respect. So that's more or less for that part that I would go with.
Yeah. And can you talk a little bit about, how do you do this? Are there any steps that you follow? Any kind of big components that you make sure is kind of in every plan to innovate?
One of the biggest mistakes I see a lot of people do is they don't listen to the end customer. So one of the things I do is, even though I'm the CEO, I design a lot of the products, but I like to get in front of the customers themselves. I love going to trade shows. I love going to lunch and learns, as they call them, which you go out there, you feed them, and you pitch your stuff, but you get that feedback from, it could be an end user, it could be in this case, an integrator who's reselling your product, whoever it may be. And the key is to not get hung up on your own beliefs and your own designs. You're just starting with something, but you need them to tell you, is it going to work? Is it enough? So for example, that product that you were talking about when you first introduced, that I introduced on the sidelines almost 2 years ago. And it was a concept. And I just in the background, they said, what do you think of this? And they said, that's great, but can you put this? Can you put this? Can you do this? And everybody had their 2 cents. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Check. And so it's like the finger in the dam. You got to keep plugging it until the dam is solid again. So once we got to the point where everybody looked at it and said, this is amazing. Did you change anything? No, it's amazing. That's where we try to get to, because then you don't have to fight that fight after it's been developed. You could go in strong. The reviews are going to be strong. The reaction's going to be strong. You really want to try to avoid, if you can help it, those, yeah, that's nice, but that's always the worst thing to hear from somebody is the buts. So in our case, yes, we like to start off with a concept, looking at what the industry is doing, then start in the background, presenting the concept getting the feedback, revising that concept based on the feedback, and then try to formulate it into the final product and then finally introduce it. And then the name of the game is once you introduce it, you better get it out there in the next 3 to 4 months from the time you introduce it, or they're going to have your head on a platter.
Yep, especially in a highly competitive industry such as yours. So
It is. Plus, you're tipping off your competitors what you're about to introduce. So we've been there. We've made that mistake where we thought we were ready and we didn't, and it has consequences to it. So we try to get a little bit more as exact as we can. Sometimes in this market, in the electronic market, you never know when something's going to cause you a little bit of a problem. You think everything's going to go perfect, and it only takes one part. That's it, one part to ruin your day. So even when you think everything's going to go right, you got what, maybe 200 different part types of the 1,000 parts that might end up on a circuit board. And it only takes one of those parts to make it so you can't ship the product. So yeah, there's a lot of coordination without a doubt.
Yeah, yeah. And can you talk a little bit about that coordination? Like once you have the product that's gotten that amazing feedback from customers, like how do you work with your team internally? Like how do you roll it out as successfully as possible?
Well, the first thing we do is we'll do what we call a pre-production run, where we'll do a lower volume run just in case something does go wrong, because you have to always assume, Murphy's law. So something's always going to go wrong at the end of the day. So what we do is we try to test it as best as we can in the lab, but it's a lab. And you have to understand that what you do in your lab, as much as you think you thought of everything, once it goes out into the real world, they're going to find new ways of breaking it. And you have to be ready for that. So the first thing I do is we have a rule in here is when you first release a product, all hands on deck. If a bug is reported or a problem is reported, that goes to the highest of priority. Do not get focused on the next feature or whatever else we're working on. Solve the problem at hand first as quickly as you can to resolve the customer so they have a good experience, and you're demonstrating that you're able to deliver a good support team as well. So a lot of times people like to talk about when everything goes great. No one likes to talk about when things go bad. And I found that I just did a trade show, and I was using a discussion point about a project we had that had a very big problem on it. But the problem led to a victory because we created a new feature that allowed us to discover future problems within minutes and then resolve it within a day or days, not weeks or months to solve the problem, depending on what the problem is. So sometimes even bad could become good, and the things you do to solve problems become a selling point as well. Well, my competition can't self-report and self-correct itself. Ours does, blah, blah, blah. So sometimes it's not always about the positive. You can lead with the negative. And I just proved it at a trade show when I told this story. Everybody just shook their head like, yep, been there, done that, had that problem. And it really ruined my world. But I'm glad to know your product has something in it that can make sure we have less of a chance of being in that situation. So you always try to turn things into a positive. Customer support and experience, very important to us. Making sure you're on top of that issue right away. Show them that you could be on your A game with it, resolve it. That way they know that they can rely on you, and then continue on with it. So that's usually what we do when we first launch is we'll do a lower run, see what the fallout rate is. Is there a failure rate? Whatever the case is, see what the firmware coming back is at, and then make sure everybody's ready to deal with that right away.
Yeah, thank you. That sounds like a very solid process. And I could see where you're leaving enough room for, right, as you said, if something doesn't go right, how do you quickly evolve and adapt?
In our world, I always say, if you can't update the firmware in the field, don't send it in the field. You always want to make certain you have some way to remote diagnose it and some way to remote update it. If you don't, you're asking for a lot of products to be returned, which can be very costly. I mean, you're going to be paying for people's shipments back, and you're going to be paying for the shipments to go back out and the labor involved. So you do want to design it robust enough to make certain you can field support it. And especially these days, it's not exactly hard to remote into people's systems to see what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. Any differences in customer expectations these days that kind of drive how you think about that?
I can't speak on behalf of all other industries. In our industry, manufacturers get blamed first. We
Mhm.
we get blamed for everything, even when it's not our fault. So you got to be prepared. I've learned to take it in stride. It's the way the industry has become. Everybody loves to blame somebody else. It's human nature. No one wants to take that responsibility and fall on the sword. So what you could really do is, the good old fashioned CYA. Have everything in writing, have your ducks in a row, be ready for it, and calmer heads prevail. You can't get mad at them, even though, yeah, you're going to get a variety of people out there. The ones who love to call in, and the first thing they say is your product sucks, and you ruined my meeting, and blah 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 blah. And it's like, whoa, let's first find out what happened, and let's see where the real problem is, and let's address that first before we go into whose fault it is. And if it's our fault, we'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. And if it's not our fault, we'll help you get you into the right direction regardless. Let's work as a team and get this resolved so the end customer has a good experience, because it's all about the end customer. You want them to have a good experience, because regardless of what goes on in the background, they don't need to see all that minutia. They just need to see what the end result was, which needs to look positive. Even if there was 20 different bad things that happen, they don't need to see that. The job of the people putting this together for the final result need to work as a team in order to make certain that they isolate this from a customer. So some of it is mentality. That's where some of this comes from but you need good partners. So knowing let's say in my case, we have dealers in the United States all across the country. You need to make certain, and you can't always guarantee it, that they're of that same mindset. If they're not, you get into what they call the blame game, and nothing is worse than the blame game. So yeah, we try to work as a team. We try to address it. We hear it out. We like to give as much information as we can, and if it's our fault, we take responsibility and we take it head on. You don't shy away from it. Proactive, not reactive. Reactive, that's going to get you into trouble every minute of the day. No hiding from customers. Even if you have no answer is an answer. You call them and you tell them, you're our number one priority. We are all over it, but we have no updates today, and that is our update. And that does go a long way. At least they know that they're being paid attention to. So these are the important elements that a company really needs to do, especially when supporting somebody.
I'm definitely with you there. And, shifting gears a little bit, I wanted to hear, what would you say is the biggest change or innovation that you've driven in your organization?
We've done numerous things around here as you try to grow. The biggest change is probably, one of our slogans is changing the typology of AV. So we're always trying to think outside the box to find a better way of doing something, because everybody gets fixated on it. So our biggest innovation that we did is, and we're kind of doing it right now, but we've come up with a whole new way of doing it, is conference room technology. We developed what we call a REAX room, REAX room. And one of the big key components of it is this little tiny 4-inch touch panel. I don't have one in my room right now. I wish I did. But it's this little 4-inch touch panel that sits on your desk, but it's not just a touch panel. It's a beamforming Dante AES67 microphone with a built-in speaker. Now, sounds impressive. It's got beamforming, it's this, it's that. What that means in layman's terms is it's not just a regular microphone like we're doing right now where it picks up your voice. And no, I'm not using it right now. I'm using a regular Logitech camera on my computer. But what this does is it will find my voice in the foreground and then get rid of up to 18 dB of background noise and separate the two of the background noise. Now, yeah, if you don't know what 18 dB is, let's just say it's a lot. It takes a lot of that background noise, gets rid of it, focuses on mine, and pulls it forward is what it does. That's phase one of the product. Through a firmware update coming in Q1 of next year, then we do what we call angular beamforming. So what does that term mean? It means using a combination of AI where we can set the exact envelope of where you are, of where it's going to pick up. So if I move 20 degrees in one direction, for example, my voice can totally cut out and you won't hear anything at all. So why is that important? Well, when you're in a meeting room and you're talking, voice travels. It hits another surface. Hard surfaces, your voice reflects. We've all been there. You're in the room, you clap your hand, you hear the echo, yell, you hear a little bit of the reverberation. That all comes back into the microphone, is what ends up happening. So because of this, you need ways of rejecting this noise so you have a better experience with the far end. Like if you just heard my phone ring a second ago, that would get cut out of the noise, um, because that's what it's designed to do. Now, we're going to take it another step further. By the end of next year, we're going to use AI. So this is where we get into using new technologies, and we're going to be able to model an individual's voice into the microphone itself. So this way, when it goes to pick up the voice, if it's not my voice, it's not going to pick it up at all. So if you, for example, were sitting next to me and you tried your voice carried over into my microphone area, it will not pick you up because you're not the right voice pattern coming in. So that is something else we've been working on with technology. Now, because each one of these has a speaker built into it, we're moving the audio across the entire table. So everybody's used to speakers being in the ceiling or the front of the room. That projects, means you got to be louder from the front to the back, or you got to project loudly from the top down. And same thing with the microphone. The microphone's got to pick you up from far away. So what we're doing is we're giving a reason for everybody to have their own control interface, which they're going to be able to vote from, raise your hand with it instead of that awkward moment of, yay, can I talk? No, you push a button and we'll tell everybody else, you get to talk next. Voting, let's vote on the budget. Who thinks this is the coolest product in the world? Yay. You know, it can do other things like watch a little video from it as well. You can also control the room, turn on and off the lights, the shades, the screen on off, whatever it needs to be, full automation on this little product. It'll even tell you where your seating location is as well, and have audio that comes back. So if you're hard of hearing or need language translation, that product addresses it as well. So you got a laptop you want to bring in, you can plug it right into the device as well. So in other words, this little tiny device is almost like it's a personal tool that is by everybody's seat to become an essential element of the interaction of the room. And now you're blanketing the entire conference room with audio and microphone. So everybody gets an equal voice. Everybody has the ability to do things, which does another thing. I know this is a long-winded one. It creates what we call a mix minus. Now, it sounds fancy. So what is a mix minus? It's a voice lift, meaning it's like projecting your voice, except when you have a big table. You ever notice how when the person's sitting all the way at the end, you got to project your voice all the way down there? Well, if everybody's got their own speaker, I can set up the system so my voice will come out to the person next to me because, well, sitting next to me, but somebody sitting maybe 3 or 4 seats away is going to have a harder time hearing me. So my microphone is going to send my audio to their speaker a little bit louder. So that way he could hear me better and more clearly. The goal is not to make it sound like a megaphone. The goal is to carry my voice evenly across the room. So in essence, because everything is in front of you, you're lowering the volume of the room, not raising the volume of the room. So in other words, conceptually, yeah, we created a whole new way of doing conferencing going forward. And at some point in the near future, we start shipping in October, and you're going to start seeing these things popping up in all conference rooms all over the world because we've solved every problem of a conference room.
I love that. I love hearing kind of what you have in the product currently, and how you're thinking about that roadmap. And I'm curious, how do you find that you can best communicate with clients every time there's kind of a new update? How do you get it out to kind of folks that don't know your company yet to kind of announce kind of what you have, that you've essentially built a better mousetrap? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, one of the biggest ways is every industry has its own trade show. So they're not just for partying, they're also for talking about your products. So what happens is you go to your trade shows. In our case, we call them Infocom, ISE, depending on what part of the world you're in. And we put up a booth and we do a demonstration of what the new technology is. We'll market it. Marketing is key. Without marketing, you can't get your message out there. And then also from going from a lot of these trade shows, you get email lists. You build up a list. Email, I find, is one of our best resources of getting the word out there, is email. Electronic has come a long way. There are other mechanisms for doing it electronically, but in our industry, if you've got a good solid email list, you're updating everybody through emails. Also, road shows. You just go around the United States, your salespeople, reps, so forth. They go out, do those lunch and learns, or just go and meet clients in person. nothing beats in person. I mean, even with COVID, I know everybody tried to change it to the Zoom and the Teams and all that other stuff. It never could replace a good old fashioned in person relationship. Relationships are critical. Knowing the people that you're working with is critical. So getting in front of people. So it's a combination of things, and then name branding. You got to get your name branding out there. People have to see that you're relevant. So you got to keep it out there. You got to keep. You can't just release one product a year and then just expect people to remember you. Even if you only release one product a year, you still need to stay relevant. Put out an app note that benefits somebody. Put out some type of message that isn't just garbage talk about how great you are as a company, something that's going to benefit them, that they're willing to read. Subject titles of the emails. I've done studies on this. So when I look at our mail list, of which I could take 2 email blasts that were identical. The only difference was they were 8 months apart from each other. And all we did was change the title of it. And that changed the reaction, how many people opened it and clicked through. It is amazing at how much a subject title will allow them to make that next click. Don't use the words free or those gimmicky sounding nonsensical words. Do something that you know is important in your industry and entices people to click that thing open, and it's going to be of some personal benefit to them in addition to the benefit you're looking for. And that's what I find works the best.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I think that's an important point, right? Not only talking about the technology and the features and functions, but the impact and, as you said, the personal benefit too, because even in business to business sales, you're selling to people at the end of the day, right?
Oh, sometimes, believe it or not, one of the popular email blasts that we get every once in a while is when you give out a free code to get into the show for free. So one, it helps them because they don't have to pay a fee to get in. And you can use that as an opportunity to, one, do nice by them, and two, then still get a message attached to it as a secondary message. Secondary messages aren't necessarily a bad thing, especially if you got them to open it up for the primary of what they were looking for. At least you got them to open it, they appreciate it, and you get a higher probability they're going to come and see you.
Right. Yeah. Well, I know you talked about how important marketing is, obviously very
Mhm.
near and dear to my heart. And I know you've mentioned in a previous conversation that you feel sometimes marketing is undervalued. I'm
Mhm.
curious kind of what you've learned, as your organization has gotten better and better about marketing over the years. Are there any other advice you would have for other CEOs?
Oh, sure, absolutely on that one. If you do trade shows, do not do a trade show without marketing. You might as well just throw your money in the garbage at that point. Um, Everybody's been there who's been to trade shows. I call it the zombie walk, where you could have exactly what they need, and the person just walks straight past you, and they do this, right? So what you need to do is you need to, one, everybody's on limited time when they go to these shows. So first off, you want the pre-marketing. You want to let them know you're going to be at the show. That takes marketing. That takes communication. So the first thing is let them know you're going to be there and that there's something worthwhile to excite them to come by your booth. They got a limited amount of time. There's only so many people they can spend their time with. You want to be part of that. Then once they're at the show, for the people that are new and you don't know, you need some type of marketing that is at the show itself, whether it's the show guide, the daily, a banner that's strategically placed. Direct them, give them a reason to come to your booth, and don't get wordy on it. No one sits there reading it. I love when people do these. Whoa, no one's going to sit there reading it. Just get a clean message that you know is going to excite people to come to you about a technology and that you're going to solve their problem, because you're talking to everybody who's going to be there. So you can't just focus on one person. You don't know what their mindsets are. So that's a big part of it when it comes to marketing is you need to make certain that they're directed to your booth. And then after you're done with the show, you need the follow up. You got to thank them for coming by your booth. And also, even if it's not to those people who specifically come by the booth, re-announce what your achievement was at the show and how excited everybody was to see what you did and all that stuff. And any videos you took and photos, always take photos of your booth and post them. Social media, slap it on there. Even if it's not the most exciting show in the world, make it look exciting. No one wants to see one guy in the booth standing there waiting for somebody to come along. No, show people in the booth. Don't just take a photo of the booth, unless it's under construction, saying, hey, we're getting ready for the show, we're excited. That's one thing. But when the show is going on, show your booth populated. Put that out there. People like to go with winners. It's human nature. They don't want to go with the people who aren't exciting. They want to go with the people who look like they're going to have a future with them. As far as just regular day-to-day marketing, like I said, email blast, number one I found. Don't do it every week. You're going to get people to just sign up and say, here's another email from them. Here's another email. If you do an email blast, make it count. Don't just do it for the sake of doing it. Do it where you got a really important message, no more than every other week is what I would recommend. You want to stay relevant, but you don't want to be obnoxious either. That just irritates. I get some of these companies, I get emails every day and I'm like, really? Unsubscribe. That's the first thing I do is I says, I don't even care if you have something that I want. I just don't need the noise. Someday when I need something from you again, I'll go online and look at it. You're literally going to root it. If it's one here or there, people can consume that. They'll delete it if they don't want it, but they're not going to spend the time on subscribing you. They will spend the time on subscribing you if they get it every other day. They're going to be annoyed and they're just going to get away from it. So build up your email list. Get your hands on that. Find ways for people to sign up to LinkedIn and Twitter. Some people like to use Facebook based on, whether you're retail. So, for ours, we're commercial. So LinkedIn seems to be the most popular for us. But you build it to followers, they get the instant message up there. So yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. And I appreciate everything you shared there, and would certainly agree with that really across the board, right? You have to be on multiple channels. You want to make it about the customer and the things that they find useful, and not just kind of, hey, here's our product. So I'm definitely with you there. And I appreciate everything that you've shared, and would love to shift gears a little bit and just hear a little bit more about you, Paul. So tell me about your background and how did you go from, Paul as a kid to where you are today? How did you get into the AV industry? I heard it was in your teenage years. Tell me more about yourself.
Well, I was born in a log cabin. No, I'm just teasing about that. But no, I mean, if you haven't figured out yet, I'm from New York, so that seems to never get away from the way you talk. And as you can see, I move the hands a lot in the background. So if you just see me doing this, no, I'm moving the hands. It's the New Yorker in me.
Out with your
Um,
hands.
so you got to talk with the hands, animated, very animated. But no, I was a teenager. Some people know what they're doing young, and that it becomes a passion. That probably becomes a passion. Some don't, and they find out later in life. It's to each their own. For me, uh, anything like whether it was mechanical, electrical, just came easy for me. I was able to learn it and figure it out on my own, and it was of interest. So I did it. Just like sports. If you like sports, you become a baseball player, a football player, whatever you're good at. So electronics was good for me. Hockey didn't work out for me, so so that wasn't going to happen, unfortunately. But for electronics, no, since the age of 9, I started getting into, I guess maybe it started when I was in school. I got to work on those TRS-80 computers. So yeah, I'm old. So, 10, print hello world, 20, go to 10, and then you see hello world, and you're like, oh, I'm a programmer. So started with that, and then, no, but in seriousness, I started coding at about the age of 9. Started soldering circuit boards together at about the age of 12 when there was a Radio Shack, and you could do little crystal radios and transistors and all those little things you could buy from the store, and you put them all together and like, oh, look, it does that. And then probably my first invention was when I was around 16, 17 years old. I started my first, this is where I got my first company was called DigiTrans for digital transformations. And we were doing t-shirts. You see it, for those who remember, you could go to like a thing where they take your image and they would print it out with all these little black and white dots from the dot matrix printers. And you'd walk around with somebody's picture on your shirt. Well, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but I decided to make a device that could do it in color. And so took an Amiga computer with 4,096 colors and Next thing you know, I made it a print that can, with subliminal dye, can come out on your t-shirt with 4,096 colors. Went to college, sold the business, came out of college and, uh, got my first job doing video walls and, you know, uh, projectors and video, and then merged into Control. And then in the background, I started my other company called Zytech, and then eventually merged it into this business, which is called Aurora, which was a programming business at one point back at the beginning. And then it became just all manufacturing about 5 years into it, doing it. By the way, one thing I will say that I did learn going back to those experiences was probably that Digitrans company. I learned how you could easily ruin a novelty and kill a market. So what I mean by that is, here the novelty was that you put image that looked kind of cool because it was a bunch of dots making up an image. Once I turned it into color, yeah, people are like, oh my God, it's in color. How I got to get it, it's in color. But then the novelty disappeared because now you got just a regular plain old image on a t-shirt. So while the novelty for the full color was there, like, wow, it's better than the black and white, when they really started stepping away from it, what did it really do? It took away the novelty of a bunch of dots making the illusion of a face. Same thing happened with video walls. If we all look now, we got all these big screen TVs now, right? We're all muted to it. So this is another lesson I love to teach out there. I know you asked it one question, but this is a great lesson about how sometimes solving a problem creates a different problem and can destroy a market. So every time you go to like a concert or whatever, if you remember back years ago, it used to be a lot of monitors making up one big image. And you knew it was a lot of monitors because you saw the bezels and you saw this grid, and it's like, wow, look at all those monitors they're using to make that big image, right? And then they did it with flat screen. At first it was tubes, then it was flat screens with projectors and all this other stuff. Now, when you look at it, how often do you see them now? Now you see these big LED walls where there are no borders anymore. It's just a big image on the side of a building. And that big image you can go see in your house on your nice big 65-inch LCD that you have in your house. And so where'd the novelty go? So other than the content itself that might draw your attention, it's not as amazing anymore if you think about it. It used to be amazing when you had all these monitors working together to make an image that you're not used to seeing versus, okay, it's a big image. So just kind of throwing it out there, how you can shift an industry, make improvements, but sometimes when you make too many improvements, the novelty is gone. I still miss my flip phone. I want my Motorola flip phone back. Well, although Samsung's trying to bring it back with their OLED.
Yeah, I do know some people that have reverted back to the plain old phones and they like not having that anymore. And then
I like I felt cool on it. You know, you just go like this, and it would like pop open really quick, and you're like, yeah, hello, I'm so cool. I got my little tiny little flip phone. I got my nice big welt of a phone that I carry everywhere with me. So it's funny how at one point you kind of like something, but then technology, while it does improve things, takes away some of the classic elements of other things. So those are the pitfalls sometimes you got to watch out for. Sometimes I think it's better to keep a novelty, but try to find the better way of doing it with keeping the novelty. So
right.
Look, we brought back record players for a short period of time because people like the novelty of it. They like the warmness of the music it was getting in that nice little popping sound that I thought was gone forever.
Yeah, what's old is new again, right? Not always in technology, but I think we're so inundated with the latest and greatest that sometimes
I don't miss the cassette player, though.
You do not miss it?
I do not miss the cassette player or the 8-track. Those are two technologies I don't miss. The famous hiss sound that you would get when you're listening to the music, or it's like,
yeah. No, I used to love making tape mixes, except you'd always hear on the radio, the next song starts before you hit the stop button. So
yeah,
it's an emblem of that time.
Yeah, but my cassette player kept eating my tapes, so it was always oh crap, the pencil, twisting it, trying to get it back in, and then hoping it's still going to work again. Yeah.
Yep. So, Paul, you're speaking to this a bit now, but you've clearly been through a lot of kind of changes in the AV industry over all these years. And I'm curious, looking back, what you know now, and after, we started and sold a few companies successfully, what advice would you give your younger self in your first ever leadership role? So, kind of knowing what you know now, what advice would you have given younger Paul?
Wow. That's a tough one. I'm a firm believer that things happen for a reason. You learn from your mistakes and you get better from them. Uh, what I do now is you know, the best thing to do is don't get over anxious. Take your time. It's use some of the advice I've already given, which I learned over the years that I wish somebody else told me. I had to find out things as I went along, and I would learn the hard way sometimes the easy way, but a lot of times the hard way. But the key is to take it in stride. Don't always think that, listen to other people. Don't always think that what you have is the best. Somebody out there is working on something that's better. Listen to the customer. The customer knows what they need more than what you think you do. Don't get hung up I've seen this so many times. I go to the CES, forgot the name of it. It's where all the new inventors go to. There's a name for it, but anyway, I wish I could remember it off the top of my head. But I've been there, and I actually go there whether I'm going to invest in somebody or whether I'm going to just most of the time help them. Use my engineering skills to look at it and say, hey, by the way, you might want to take a look at this. It'll improve your product, and you'll do that. You know who the companies are going to survive because they're the ones like, wow, thank you for the advice. We really appreciate it. I'm doing it just to be nice because I wish somebody could have done that for me. Um, but the ones who you know are going to struggle are the ones who fight you on it. And instead of just listening to you and saying, oh, even if they don't agree with it, just saying, oh, that's good advice. We'll take it into consideration. No, no, no. The way we did this is because it is this, and we did this and this and this. And it's like, oh God, okay, we got one of those. And don't be that person. First off, no one wants to hear that you know everything. They want you to listen to them and feel like they're being heard and take it into consideration. And if you get enough of a consensus, when somebody hears that, use it to ask it again to somebody else and see if it's something valid. Even if the person doesn't have a valid point, verify if it's valid. Just ask other people and do a sampling. So my best advice is when you design something, um, make sure that it's consumable. Make sure that use people. This is another thing I love to do. I like to use people who know nothing about what you do, because if they can't figure out what it is, then you've done a poor job on making it simple enough for somebody to figure it out of the box. They should be able to understand what it is, or at least with the instructions that you've provided to be able to figure it out and consume it. If they can't, at least, for something that a consumer truly does need to understand, you've done a bad job. So I like to use people who know nothing about what you've done, who haven't been swayed into it. That's usually a good thing to do out there that I recommend all the time to do it. And for those of you out there, can't say that I can help everybody, but I do when available. I try to help other people. What comes around goes around. You never know when it benefits you as well. So for an industry, always try to help the others out there. Believe it or not, I've even helped my competitors out at times. I know it seems strange, but during COVID, they needed parts they couldn't get a hold of. I helped them out, believe it or not. And you know what they did for me? They helped me out with the parts I couldn't get a hold of. We both stayed in business because of it. Not, we're going to put them out of business. Lots of work to go around. You don't need to become a monopoly and dominate the world. You need to just do your part and you'll be just fine. So that's probably my best advice is don't try to take over the world. Take it one step at a time.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's great advice. And I agree. There's plenty of business and new opportunities to go around. So I don't think of competitors as competitors. Really look at the ecosystem and how you can help each other out. And so, Paul, to that end, if people want to reach out to you after today's conversation, how can they reach you?
So our website is Aurora, AURORAMM, as in multimedia.com. And contact information's up on there on how to get in touch with our company to see our products and what we do and how we do it. And I am proud to say that we do manufacture most of our products in the United States in our own building. So one of those rare electronic manufacturers that still build our products, so the majority of them in the United States. And we have our own assembly line right here in the building.
I love that. Well, kudos to you. And that was a really great conversation. So thank you, Paul. Great to have you
Thank
on
you.
the show.
Appreciate it, and pleasure being here.
And thank you to everyone who's listening. I know I really loved hearing about Paul's approach to listening to the customer and the emphasis on innovation without focusing too much on what the competition is doing, really the message around chart your own path based on what the market wants. So if today's episode gave you, our listeners, valuable insights, and I'm sure that it did, please share it with someone. Spreading this kind of knowledge and information helps all of us grow as leaders, and it equips us to drive successful innovation and transformation in our organization. So thanks again, Paul. And this has been another great episode of Shift and Thrive. See you all next time. That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.